inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
For 80 years, tens of thousands of local children have headed for Camp Joy every summer. From its origins in 1937, Camp Joy has been different than other local camps. Look at this 1953 film from Camp Joy when it was in Kroger Hills, not in its present location in Clarksville and Warren County. Those are white and black children swimming together. That would never have happened or been allowed in Cincinnati public schools at that time. This has always been camping with a mission and a vision of a diverse and inclusive society. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. It's summertime. Kids are headed to camp. One local camp, Camp Joy, is marking its 80th anniversary this year. What sets Camp Joy apart is not just age, but also its mission from the beginning of modeling an integrated, inclusive vision of society that could support a better world. To discuss the amazing story of Camp Joy, I am joined by Jennifer Eismeier, the Executive Director of Camp Joy, and Tommie Lewis, a member of the Board of Trustees of Camp Joy, and I just found out has done all of the most important events out at Camp Joy. So welcome to Newsmakers. So 80th anniversary. This is a long time for any institution. And Jennifer, to what extent is that original vision the vision that you're still operating with? How would you say that there's a relationship but also a maturation?
Very much so. That is part of the DNA of Camp Joy. So it was part of our founding, and it's something that we're very thoughtful about and hold very dear to us as we're this day-to-day operating and really in our values that drives us as we think about our next 80 years.
So, Tommie, for you as a board member, how much of that commitment to integration, to inclusiveness is important, and the reason why you're on the board?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. Obviously, as we pursue our mission of engaging our young people and old people, or older people, if you will, in this space, we believe that this greater Cincinnati area is a historical landmark, and Camp Joy has been a vital part of sustaining the inclusive excellence, if you will, with regards to the community.
You know, if you go back to the beginning, a lot of this takes place in 1937, after the flood, after the destructiveness of the 37 flood, and people of goodwill trying to find a way to help children who are in the inner city. And a lot of this activity started in the West End around St. Barnabas Church, and there's a sketch of St. Barnabas that the camp supplied for me. But even more important are the people who were involved in this. And a person who was really somebody who was a great influence on me is Reverend Maurice McCracken. And we also have a photo of Reverend McCracken. Can you talk a little bit about McCracken, Mac, and what he meant to the camp?
Sure. Well, he was such a force in the West End for this inclusion and really continue the tradition of ensuring that kids who were living in poverty, who didn't have other opportunities, were able to experience a safe space where they could go and play and have fun. And he was such a pillar of the community. And as a white man, he really brought a special opportunity to ensure that we were staying true to that original vision of all kids being able to enjoy camp.
Let's be clear, though. The understanding of diversity and inclusion wasn't the same as we would be operating with today.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
How would you, it's just around the issue of race, how would you define how that has evolved? Either one of you, I don't.
Yeah, I think that Camp Joy was a very courageous in its efforts of being inclusive. So diversity was basically white and black. We know that at the time there was segregation, which was in full force. And so this was an effort that was really ahead of its time. To really engage the West End, and I'm passionate about it because my own parents are from the West End, and they were familiar with Camp Joy in the 40s and the 50s and going into the 60s. And so as Camp Joy was looking to cross and broaden the definition of diversity, it continues to do the same to this day.
Jen, you were sketching out just before we went on air, it wasn't instantly everybody understood exactly how everybody was going to relate. So there was an evolution early on, right?
That's right. And we've been as we've expanded our programming, so it's summertime and kids are coming to camp, but we provide programming year-round for school children and also for adults. And that has evolved over time as we've served more schools, and we've been very thoughtful about how are we giving kids, people of all ages, opportunities to interact with one another in ways that they might not, where they're learning or they're working. And we certainly have broadened the definition of inclusion. So we're very thoughtful about serving, from a camp's perspective, kids from any background that otherwise might not have the opportunity to go to camp. It was the mid-90s when we started really working with Children's Hospital and serving kids with medical conditions.
We have a photograph that the camp supplied us, expanding this is wonderful, and because this happens to be children with some physical challenges, but also it's not just physical challenges in the observable sense sometimes. It's
right.
Children with other challenges as well, right?
That's right. We work with kids that are grieving the loss of a parent, kids that may have cancer or heart condition or diabetes, and we see that kids, just as in the beginning where kids had a safe space where they could go and play and just experience new things, that's very much what we do with kids that are coming out through our medical camps.
We have some clips of some scenes from the 1950s of film, and I think this would be a good time. That safe space. This is what comes through when I saw this film. People interacting, doing things that kids do, play games, ride a horse, swim together. These are very simple things on one level. It's not, we're going to deliver this theoretical message. It's just doing things with people.
It's just doing it. And so that's one of the easiest things to do with regards to diversity or inclusion, is just to do it. This is a safe environment. Camp Joy, it's always been that safe environment. It's an opportunity for young adults and our more seasoned adults to be their natural selves, to be open to explore the journey toward joy, however they may self-define it. So the historical background of Camp Joy lends itself to a very progressive and very optimistic future indeed.
There's a couple of images that we have that the camp supplied. One is of a West End pickup. This is just a wonderful image in my mind. That those two kids are so cute, and I just labeled that cute. But there's picking up some children in the West End, which there's this truck. And what you realize is we're dealing with a simpler time.
Yeah.
You look at those swimming pools. Yeah. Those are not fancy swimming pools, the chlorination systems. I mean, they're what was expected at that time. But today we would say, well, we got to do that. But picking up the kids, or there's also an image right after this one of Jackie Robinson and people visiting the camp. And okay, this is a famous person visiting a camp, but you also bring the police out to come out with children and create those kinds of relationships too, just putting people together that way.
We do. We have some fantastic partnerships, and the Cincinnati Police Department is an excellent example of getting people out of their normal patterns of behavior and putting them in a place where they are free. They're free to be able to learn about one another and kind of meet each other wherever they are and change their patterns of behavior, change their perspective, so that when they go back to wherever they are, home or work, that they have the benefit of that changed perspective. And we really work hard at Camp Joy to make sure that we are meeting people where they are. It's very important that we're acknowledging that people are different. And that's a big part of how we help make Camp Joy the kind of experience that it's been and hopefully will continue to be.
Tommie, you have experienced Camp Joy as an adult through the African American Leadership Program. very possibly going to be a member of Leadership Cincinnati this coming year, and you'll be right back out there.
Yes.
From an adult perspective, but that experience of doing it as an adult, what was important to you? What did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, three things very quickly. One, as an adult, it was an opportunity for me to remove myself from the spirit of the corporate and brick and mortar environment to the more natural and basically nature and being free in that space. Secondly, to let down all the guards of biases, preconceived notions, and sometimes some stereotypes that we may have of other people and myself in particular. And then thirdly, just seeing that this gem of a camp in Camp Joy, kind of off the beaten path, had a lot of history that as a professional and a native Cincinnatian, I was unaware of. And so it allowed me as a professional to say, hey, how can I build empathy, return back into my business, and reconnect with the other humans in the business, as well as what can I do more for the greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky region.
There's also another thing about those adult programs that I think is important to say, is those adult programs help fund some of the children's programs. The adult programs are able to pay at a rate different than children can.
That's right.
And I know for Leadership Cincinnati, when we were that was never a problem. And the classes frequently then raised additional money to send children to camp. So these adult and children programs have an interesting relationship. Where's the camp headed? What's on the agenda for the future?
Well, we're staying true to our roots, which is this inclusion, of really being thoughtful about providing opportunities for all different kinds of people, wherever they are, to experience the freedom of Camp Joy and the opportunity to play. We've been around for 80 years. We're looking forward to another 80 at least. Mm-hmm. But really, that being able to learn, grow, play, observe, and take that piece of joy back home with you,
yeah,
that's central to what we do.
You know, you just used the term play several times, and we talk about that with children. The children learn through play. And anybody who has a grandchild or a young child knows that it's play that really is the real learning opportunity. It's also the opportunity for adults, and sometimes we forget that. Absolutely. That going out and playing, doing things physical, get in touch with nature when you live in a city, can transform you. Congratulations on 80 years, and I want to make sure people know how to find out more and also to share their stories, because you're collecting stories.
That's right, we are. Yes, we want those stories.
If you want to find out more about Camp Joy or have a story, a photo, a film clip to share with them during this 80th anniversary, go to their website at camp-joy.org, and the Share Your Story opportunity comes right up. So stay tuned. After the break, the first effort to use Brown versus Board of Education to desegregate a northern school district happened right here in our region, Hillsborough, Ohio. But we will take you out in the spirit of Camp Joy with a scene from 1971. Welcome back. Millions of us have been taught that segregation in American schools ended in 1954 with a Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. Although that established a legal precedent, it only opened a long struggle. In the South, forces opposed to desegregation established private academies and abandoned public schools to African Americans and the poor. In the North, Brown did not address de facto segregation that rested on drawing school attendance lines to reflect residential patterns in ways that kept schools segregated. The first effort in the nation to challenge northern school desegregation policies or segregation policies started in 1957, or 54, I guess, really, started in 1954, culminating in 1957. Locally, right in Hillsborough, Ohio, near where we are in our region. On the 60th anniversary of that action, the Highland County Historical Society has developed an exhibit entitled the Lincoln School Exhibit and a video about the Hillsborough movement. African American children in Hillsborough in the 1950s were forced to attend the segregated Lincoln School. Beginning in 1957, or 54, pardon me, determined African American mothers and their children marched every day for 2 years to Webster Elementary, demanding quality integrated education for their children. In the face of local resistance, those Hillsborough parents appealed to the federal court to lodge the Clemens versus Board of Education of Hillsborough, Ohio, the first Northern test case using Brown versus Board of Education. This morning, I am joined to discuss this new exhibit and the events in the 1950s to desegregate Hillsborough schools by Kati Burwinkel, who is the Executive Director of the Highland County Historical Society, and Teresa Williams, who was at the 1950s a child in Hillsborough whose parents were determined to desegregate the schools and who is now an adult still living in Hillsborough and is here to, who has direct knowledge of this. And you were old enough at that time.
Yes, 10 years old.
You were 10 years old. So this is 1954? Is it 54?
I'll be 74 this
Okay.
week.
You're a little bit older than me, but not much. About 2 years. So what do you remember your parents saying? You were a 10-year-old, old enough to know what's going on, but not fully connect to all of this. What do you remember your parents saying about why they were doing what they were doing?
Because the school was not fit for us kids to be in it after it had been set on fire.
And it had been purposely set on fire.
Yes, Mr. Partridge set it on fire so that we could be integrated into the white schools. But they still didn't want to do that. They was going to remodel it and send us back anyway.
And this whole thing, and the way the exhibit language is set up, it's the mothers. There's a focus, I notice, on the mothers marching every day to this other school, to Webster. Do you remember those morning marches and going to that?
We had to start out down at the bottom of the hill. Everybody met, and we marched from down in the bottom of Walnut all the way across to the Webster School on West Walnut. We were on East Walnut. Okay. And after we got there to the schoolhouse, they would turn us away, wouldn't let us in. So
and then what would you do?
March back home, and then they started having home school classes for us. Okay. And the Quaker teachers from Wilmington would come over and give us homework for the week, and then the mothers would work with us every day, and then the Quaker teachers would come back, pick it up, and give us new lessons. And we did that for 2 years.
We have a picture right now of the old Lincoln School. Mm-hmm. This is after the fire, right?
Yes.
With it partially boarded up. Do you remember what that school was like? Was it before the fire? Was there any quality there?
We had there was first, second, and third grades in one room. These were on the first floor. 4th, 5th, and 6th was in another room. And then they used to have the 7th upstairs, the 8th.
Okay. And there's a picture we have of the marchers that I would like to put up. This is the marchers out on the street. There was also a picture we had of the marchers. That's a different one. So anyway, there was one that we could have found Teresa in.
That was the first. She was in the first.
In the very first one that we used at the top.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So.
No, the one before this one.
Oh, the one before this. If we can just go back to that. So she was there in that picture, and your mother was there too, right?
Yes.
So towards the back.
Yes, I was on this end with the coat on.
Okay.
And my mother was. There was a girl in there holding her head down. My mom was next to her.
So,
in the back.
How many families, how many children were involved in these marches?
It was around 34 children and about 13 or 17 mothers.
Kati, as the director of Historical Society. How much did you know about this story, and when did you start poking around in it? And it's wonderful that there are people still here who were participants in this story.
Actually, I'm not the executive director. I'm the vice chair of the board, but I'm the director of this project.
Okay.
And just to clarify that. When a group of us got onto the board a couple years ago, if we were really dedicated to bringing this history to our museum, because it was a history that wasn't told, we didn't have any African American history represented in our museum at the time. So we have since done an Underground Railroad project with a number of counties around us last year, and then that was our first step. And then this year, or actually a year and a half ago, we started to meet with Teresa and some of the other children of the marching children, and also 100-year-old Miss Elsie Young, who's a marching mother, still living, still participating. She comes to almost every one of our meetings. And we just began working together to decide how we wanted to tell the story. And the story was so compelling coming from their mouth, hearing the people who lived it. The oral history was so important that it became evident to us that we wanted to do a film and have them say it in their own words and tell their history, and that's what we did.
And that film was done by Andrea Terrici.
Yes, it was.
Who, we're not using that here because I wanted to talk to Mrs. Williams, but here is Judge Jones's recent autobiography, Answering the Call, and he talks about this case, although he was not directly involved. You went to the NAACP, or your parents went to the NAACP, and sought help in the lawsuit. Thurgood Marshall was still directing things at that point before he went to the court. And did you ever go to court? Did you ever have to testify?
No, I didn't, but Joyce Clemens was the plaintiff, I think.
The child litigant.
Yes, and she's still living.
And she's on our committee, and she was the only child that actually went to the court.
Okay. And she was the named defendant or plaintiff in this particular case.
Yes.
What was the reaction once the school was desegregated and children were admitted? What was the reaction of the community?
Well,
how were you accepted at this?
When we got in, they made us take a test to place us. So every one of us that was in that situation, out of all those children, only one passed the test. Everybody else was set back a grade.
Oh, okay.
So they said that was their test that they had to give us to place us.
How about with the other children in the class when you went?
There were some children that played with us, and then there were some that didn't like the situation, so we had problems with them. And but now, if you ask some of them, they didn't know anything about it. The ones that played with us then, that stuff wasn't talked about in their homes, so they wouldn't know. But there were other people that knew, and they kept stuff going.
Katie, what do you think is going to be the reaction of this to people living in Hillsborough, to redoing, reminding people, remembering this history?
Well, I think we're remembering it in a very positive and inspirational way. This is really a story of the strength of women, the strength of peaceful civil disobedience. Hillsborough has a strong history of that. Eliza J. Thompson and the early temperance movement and women marching in Hillsborough. We have a history of that.
Closing down saloons.
And we're proud of that. And this is just another one, I think this is about the power in everybody to change history. We all have that within us. And I think when you see the exhibit and see the film, that it's really told in an inspirational way. We're remembering these mothers and what they did, and I don't think it's going to open any wounds. It was never our intentions, and it was very important to the Lincoln women on our committee that this be told in a positive way, in an inspirational way, and be about healing.
This point it's about the women, and the mothers, the marching mothers, the women. is that the way you remember it, not the fathers?
Yes, there wasn't very many fathers that could go with us.
Okay.
But the mothers was there every day.
Every day. They were the ones.
And then they the ones did the teaching too.
Unfortunately, I'm just about out of time, but I want to let people know that if you want to find out more about this Lincoln School exhibit, it's now open. And
It'll open this weekend.
Well,
Yep.
This is Sunday morning.
Yep.
Now open and in the Highland County Historical Society in Hillsboro, Ohio. And you can learn more on their website at hchistoricalsociety.weebly.com. Thank you for making Newsmakers part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week and have a good week.
Thank you.